All right, Shalom. Before I start, I'm going to give all praises to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakha Korash, double honors to the elders and apostles, great millstone, peace, blessings, and salutations to all elect Akim, Wak Wathium, learning, teaching, truth, and sincerity. All right, this is going to be another video. This is off this documentary. It says The Days of Noah, the Flood, part 1 of 4. It's on Amazon Prime. Now, I'm going to let about these next 12 to 14 minutes play, and basically what you have is a group of scientists. They're basically admitting to you that evolution is false, the fact that the earth isn't millions of years old, and that the Bible is true, and the biblical explanation of the earth's creation is what is actually true. And one of the main factors that they point to is an example out of the Grand Canyon. Alright, so I'm going to let this clip play. I'm going to try not to pause it too much, and they're going to be using big science terms, so I will pause it every so often to explain those terms in simple English, but I'm gonna let these scientists tell it, because when we tell it out there on the highways and byways, y'all don't believe us. All right, niggas don't believe shit unless it's coming out the white man's mouth. So we gonna see what they have to say.
Of material.
So water brings mud or sand or even coarser materials, carries it and deposits it later. That's typically how the rocks in a geologic column form. And then there are different kinds of sediments, so they end up making rocks that look very different, right on top of each other. But there's a question of this one layer formed, and then how much time passed until the next layer came on top of it?
The commonly held belief is that over millions.
So the commonly held belief, what was taught to us in schools, what's taught at universities, what is projected throughout the world, all right, is what they're about to explain. And then they're going to explain what actually is and what actually did happen biblically.
Of years, an ocean advanced over the entire continent and deposited a sedimentary layer, and then retreated, leaving the ground dry once again. In this dry period, lasting tens of millions of years, this sediment would have been exposed to weathering and erosion.
And if it just sits there without being covered up fairly quickly, then a lot of things happen. Plants grow on it, roots go down through it, animals burrow through it, flowing water will carve channels and gullies through it, and so it doesn't just stay undisturbed.
Tens of millions of years of weathering and erosion would create an enormous amount of uneven terrain between these two layers, such as hills and valleys.
So what they're saying, if you can look at the picture, now, if evolution and all that stuff was true, here you wouldn't have rock formations that are perfectly on top of each other. If it takes a million and bajillion years for one to form, and in between that time, like they're explaining, you're going to have trees growing, animals digging, you shouldn't have perfect rock on top of each other. You should have cracks, cuts, all right, divides, but you don't have any of that. Why? Because of the Great Flood. The Great Flood is what shifted the earth and broke up all the continents. All right, when you look at the map, the continents all fit together perfectly, and it's explained in Genesis when you read. All right, and that's what they're explaining to you.
But this is not what we see. There's little variation between these layers. They're extremely flat.
And these time spans that supposedly occurred between two layers can be 10 million years, it can be 15 million, they can be up to 150 million years.
Slakius. And this guy, I just wanted to pause it, he's a paleontologist. His name is Leonard Brand. He has a PhD, all right, so I'm not making this shit up.
It's like you see at one place in the Grand Canyon, in deposits in the Grand Canyon.
You'd expect a lot of erosion then. In fact, so much erosion that the whole record should be gone a long time ago. Average rates of erosion are about 61 millimeters per 1,000 years.
With the same rate of erosion of 61 millimeters per 1,000 years, we should not be looking for 300 feet of erosion, not 3,000 feet of erosion, but 30,020 feet of erosion over a period of 150 million years. All the sedimentary layers in the Grand Canyon combined should have eroded 6 times over, and yet these layers are flat.
So what that means, if the erosion happened according to the millions of years that they say the earth has been around, then the Grand Canyon basically shouldn't exist. It should be a bunch of empty holes everywhere. But things didn't go down like that. The Great Flood occurred and ripped up everything all at once, and set it back down. All right, not millions of years at a time. All right, but this man has been able to convince everybody otherwise.
telling us that these layers were deposited rapidly in quick succession.
So is it realistic to think that 150 million years passed and nothing happened to this layer? It was not eroded out into serious gullies, and it looks much more likely that there wasn't that time in between those different layers.
The weather is always changing, and the surface of the Earth is always changing with it. Thunderstorms, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and wind, among other factors, are always changing and sculpturing the surface of our planet. These elements are always depositing sediment or eroding sediment, resulting in irregular surfaces. If you have time, then you're going to have change. So when we look at the contact points between these layers of sediment and see no evidence of erosion and no evidence of deposition, this idea that millions of years went by and nothing happened to the surface, it just doesn't add up.
Yep.
These are turbidite layers, often graded coarse to fine, which defies uniformitarian principles. It had to be rapid deposition.
When you have a gap of 100 million years, you have a couple miles of erosion. Yet you look at the gap and it's flat. If it had taken a lot of time, you should have irregular erosion at the gaps.
So the erosional feature is saying, oh, hey, short time, not long time.
The flatness of the layers and so on tells you about a past that's entirely different, and this is the kind of data that you'd expect from the Genesis flood.
Yep. From the Genesis flood. So the way that those rocks, and you can see it in the picture, if y'all can look at the colors are different, but they're lined up horizontally, meaning from side to side. Because when the water ripped everything open, it didn't stack in random different spots over a period of time. It was all one big event that slapped everything around, which is why the rocks look the way that they do, if you can understand what they're saying.
Millions of years worth of erosion is missing because it was never there.
Yep.
This is what the rocks are telling us. But erosion is not the only thing missing. In fact, entire layers of sediment representing tens of millions of years are also missing.
Turn it down some. And so now we're actually going to fast forward. I want to bring up something that they called
it's Coconino sandstone. It's sandwiched right on
the Great Unconformity, which is something you can go look up.
45 miles of
Let me see.
The Great
Okay, yeah, they're about to start explaining it. Now, you have something that's in the science community. It's known as the Great Unconformity, in which it's crazy that this exists. Basically, they're acknowledging that their dates and time periods are false, and they have a whole name for that time period. But you don't learn about it. Everyone shut up. Go to lunch and recess. Class dismissed. They don't want to explain any of this. All right, and what the Great Conformity is, basically, there's 1.3 billion years missing when you look at the Earth, if you're following evolution and all that. And that's because that amount of time didn't exist. All right, there's a broken timeline because they're lying to you. And that timeline only makes sense when you believe in the Bible from beginning with the flood. So let's let it play and they'll explain it.
The level of the Colorado River, we find what we call the peak.
Salak, I'm not going to be bringing out, I'm trying to hold the phone and I'm working the remote in my hand, but you can go read Genesis chapter 6, to learn about the flood. All right, and they're bringing out key information. And there's a good chance this video is going to get taken off YouTube. You know how they like to do us. So if you come across this video, save it, download it, pass it around. This is the type of stuff that they don't want us knowing, which is why now something like this isn't going to be put in Hollywood. This isn't going to be on the History Channel. This isn't going to be shown in any classrooms. This is going to be swept under the rug and forgotten about.
The volcanic material sits there, and it's pretty rough and pretty jumbled. And then the Cambrian sediments that come in over that, lay over that, and then now they become very non-jumbled layer after layer.
I became keenly aware of that great unconformity that lies between the Precambrian and the Cambrian there in the Grand Canyon. You can't miss it. It's with you all the time.
The great unconformity in the Grand Canyon represents 1.2 billion years of time that is
1.2,
missing between the
okay.
Precambrian and the Cambrian layers. Over this amount of time, we should see up to 45 miles of uneven erosion. That's nearly enough erosion to erode away the entire 25 miles of the Earth's crust twice. Yet the
So between those two layers, the Cambrian and Precambrian, there should be what they said 45 miles of erosion in between them, and there's not, because that's a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's a bunch of mumbo jumbo bullshit that you were spoon fed in class when you had your fucking finger up your nose, not paying attention. And it's the same bullshit that you have to get stuffed in your ears to go to school to learn. And if you can remember it enough, you know, then they'll give you a decent job. But it's a bunch of lies. All right, the people that are running the show in this world, what is that? Psalms 14. What is it in 1? Basically, the foolish have said that there is no God. You know, only an absolute retard could be an atheist. When you look at the beauty of this planet, the beauty of nature, the arrangement of everything in existence, it just points to the fact that there is an intelligent being behind it all.
Cambrian sits flat on top of the Precambrian layer. And once again, the contact point between these two layers is horizontal, telling us that the deposition of these layers is not the work of 1.2 billion years of erosion, but empirical evidence for widespread water-based catastrophe.
Right there. Now, and they just said it, this is evidence of water-based widespread catastrophe. Now, when you look at these rock, what you're seeing are those lines that look like streaks of lightning on the side of that rock. That is the impact of water ripping away at rock. All right, this is something that you see in other areas. When water slams and rips into rocks, it leaves a lightning looking streaks through it. All right, just like a person who if you ever seen a person struck by electricity, they might have lines like this on their skin. But in water does the same thing to rock. All right, so this is going to show you that specifically dealing with the Grand Canyon, that big old landmass was ripped open by the flood. All right, and dealing with all the continents, they were separated by the flood. All right, what's that? In I forget the chapter in Genesis. I believe it mentions Peleg.
Catastrophe that occurred rapidly in a short period of time.
Then you come to the Cambrian layer, and all of a sudden things change dramatically. Most of your animal phyla appear all of a sudden in that Cambrian layer.
Not only isolated species, but whole phyla appear suddenly. Now that's mind-boggling. If you take a phylum, and that's a huge category of creatures. A phylum Mollusca, for example, is every single snail and slug down to squids and octopi and all the creatures that belong to this group. And they all appeared simultaneously at the same time. That doesn't leave much room for slow evolutionary processes.
This is a double problem for evolution here that we have. And evolutionists are aware of this. They call this the Cambrian explosion.
The Cambrian explosion is the period referred to in the Cambrian layers where animals appear fully formed in the fossil record. These fully formed fossils consist of the data we observe. Since the Precambrian layer does not contain fossils of animal phyla or intermediary species, this leaves the concept of origins from interconnected evolutionary steps ever to exist in the realm of theory.
So what does that talk about? Is that
So to give you basic English, what they're explaining is the fact that between these two layers of rock, because when you read in Genesis, when the waters came, it tells you that it killed all the land animals. You know, the only ones that survived was Noah and his family, and the animals that were natural water creatures, that was it. But anything that was land-based was died, except for the animals that got on the ark. And the green that's at the top, those are the carcasses and the fossils of the animals that all died and were drowned instantly in the water. And what they're explaining is that they were found fully formed, meaning that there's no, you can't find an animal, that was in the middle of its evolution, that in its evolution process. You can't. There's no missing link between man and monkey. There's no missing link between dinosaur and crocodile, because they don't exist. All the animals were being found fully formed at the top, is what they're explaining, and it's telling you that all that other shit is just a theory, aka it's a bunch of bullshit. All right, because if it was real, then they should have been able to find evidence of it at the bottom rock that's blue before the waters came and washed it away. All right, that's basically what they're what they're explaining to you.
About evolution? Hardly. It's about creation.
This Precambrian layer, often called the basement rock, only contains fossils of single-celled organisms and some soft-bodied creatures such as worms or jellyfish. This fits the biblical record because before the flood, there was no severe weather patterns or large...
Yep. So basically, if evolution was real, you would have found them in the you would have found animals, you know, so-called, you would have found them in the Precambrian layer, all right, the basement rock as they called it. But you don't find them there. You find fully formed animals up at the top part of the Cambrian layer. You know, so that's about it. I just wanted to, you know, get this out there. And now these are people who, you know, I don't care what you, hey, this motherfucker, he has gotten out of his zip code. He knows more than you. They did the tests, did the graphs, you know, so this isn't just a bunch of people speaking out of their ass. All right, these are scientists who came to the realization, who understand that there is a higher power in the heavens. All right, so with that, I'm gonna give all praises to Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, B'Hashem, Rachach Horash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, peace, blessings, and salutations to all the elect Achim, Wak, Wathium, learning, teaching, truth, and sincerity. You know, hey, they'll probably take this video down, so once you get it, just download it. You know, so I'm gonna say Shalom.